My name is Marcus Roy. In 3 hours before the company's annual black tie gala, the one night of the year where everything I'd built was finally about to shine, my wife stood in front of the full-length mirror, surrounded by her friends, laughing like they were already sipping champagne on a yacht. Talia was stunning. Always had been. Hair pulled into a sleek low bun that screamed elegance, makeup sculpted like she was born red carpet ready, the high slit of her black gown revealing just enough to remind me why I once chased her like the world depended on it. But tonight, as she stood there with Jules and Brooke, both glittering in designer gowns and louder personalities, I wasn't her husband. I was an accessory she was already trying to tuck away. I stood at the doorway of our bedroom, wearing my best suit, the navy one I had tailored months ago for this very night. A slim black tie, polished shoes, my hair freshly trimmed. I'd even pocketed the monogrammed cufflinks she gave me for our anniversary 2 years ago. The one she swore made me look presidential. I'd sent a quick text to my business partner Arden just before stepping out. Big night. See you there. I was ready. And then she said it. Take the bus, Talia said flatly, adjusting her diamond earring without once looking in my direction. I'm driving the Tesla with the girls. We want to make an entrance. I blinked. For a second, I thought she was joking, that she'd flash me that crooked smile she used to give when she was teasing. But she didn't even glance at me. Just kept swiping gloss across her lips like I hadn't spoken, like I wasn't standing there with excitement clinging to me like a second skin. Brooke snorted from behind her, and Jules, the loudest one, giggled into her champagne flute. Oh, ouch, she said, dragging the word out like it was some delicious secret. Did he think he was riding with us? I figured we'd go together, I said, my voice trailing off as the weight of it hit me. I wasn't invited. Not really. Not even as her plus one. I thought this was something we were celebrating, together. That's when she finally looked at me, through the mirror, not directly. Her expression was blank, as if I were the coat hook in the corner of the room. Useful, convenient, easy to ignore. We want to make an entrance, she repeated. You get that, right? There's press. Photographers. It's a whole thing. She didn't say it unkindly, but that's what made it worse. It wasn't anger. It was dismissal. The same kind I'd felt creeping in over the last few months, ever since she started hanging with that new crowd from the office, PR consultants, influencers, brand managers who wore ambition like perfume. They loved status. Curated dinners. Brunches with camera angles. They loved Talia. And slowly, she stopped needing to love me. I watched as they headed down the curved staircase, heels clacking on the marble like they were descending into a runway. Laughter echoing against the walls I helped pay for. The Tesla keys jingled in her hand as she walked out like a celebrity heading for a paparazzi ambush. The front doors slammed behind them, sealing their performance. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the faint shimmer of her perfume that still hung in the air. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just hollow. I checked my watch, still early. The gala was only 15 minutes away by car. Longer by bus. I tapped out a quick message to Arden again. Change of plans. I'll meet you there. T's making an entrance. His reply came quick. Want me to swing by? Nah, I typed back. Let her have her moment. Ours is coming. Because the truth was, I could have shown up in a limo. I could have pulled rank. I could have reminded her that while she posted pictures of charcuterie boards and captioned designer handbags with #BossEnergy, I had quietly spent the last 4 years building something real, something powerful. But instead, I walked into the hallway, grabbed my coat, and stepped out into the soft dusk air. The street lamps flickered on as I strolled 4 blocks to the bus stop. My breath puffed slightly in the chill, but I didn't rush. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt steady. At the bus shelter, an older man nodded at me. A woman beside him hummed quietly to herself. No one knew who I was. And that was exactly how I wanted it. For now. Because tonight wasn't about being seen. Tonight was about being revealed. And when the lights dimmed and the mic passed hands, they weren't going to remember who arrived in a Tesla. They were going to remember the man they laughed at. The man they ignored. The man who quietly took the bus on the night he became a billionaire. As the bus arrived with a hiss and opened its door, I stepped inside, dropped my fare, and sat in the back. I watched the city blur past as it carried me toward the party, toward the reckoning. And as I leaned back into the seat, my fingers tightening around the folded program I printed that morning with my name in bold at the bottom of the agenda, I smiled. Let them laugh. They won't be laughing for long. I didn't argue. I just nodded and watched Talia's entourage of high society sirens sweep down the marble steps and into the night air, their laughter carried off by the breeze. In that moment, I felt the weight of every too quiet, too modest, and just Marcus remark I'd endured since we met sink onto my shoulders like a lead cloak. Yet I stood straight, slipping my phone easily into my pocket and refusing to let the sting show in my posture. They all thought I was a joke, Talia, her friends, even the world we lived in. They had no idea that for the last 4 years I've been building a tech startup in a cramped apartment, coding through nights filled with takeout boxes and neon insomnia, crafting a product that was quietly revolutionizing industries. I turned from the mansion's grand entrance to face the quiet street, the hush wrapping around me in contrast to the manicured chaos inside. The valet lights glimmered behind me, bouncing off the polished chrome of Teslas and Bentleys, a parade of status symbols that I'd never cared for until tonight, when they'd been used to exclude me. Exclusion felt different than underestimation, more personal. But it suited me. If they were busy staring at chrome curves, they wouldn't see the real power hurtling toward them. I pulled my coat tighter, button by button, and started the 4-block walk to the bus stop. Arden had texted, "You sure about this?" I paused under a street lamp, its yellow glow casting long shadows, and typed back, "Let them laugh." The mixars tonight. It felt almost blasphemous to think of being the center of attention after being so carefully hidden, but that's exactly what we were about to do. Arden and I had spent months orchestrating our launch, a silent takeover disguised as a humble acquisition. The housing of our software within Keen's infrastructure was going to skyrocket their revenues and, more importantly, validate my years of unseen toil. The pavement was cool under my shoes, and the city's usual symphony of horns and distant sirens felt muted, as if the universe itself was impatient for the revelation to unfold. I passed oak trees lining the street, their leaves barely rustling in the evening breeze. A couple strolled hand in hand, unbothered by my presence. They didn't care about Keen Holdings or black tie galas or a man who had become a billionaire on a humble bus ride. This anonymity suited me fine. The fewer eyes on me now, the bigger the discovery later. I reached the bus shelter and sat on the bench, taking out my phone to glance at our slide deck one last time. The one Arden and I would project onto the massive screens in the ballroom later tonight. The one that would show charts of tripled revenue, infographics of global system integrations, and the bold statement, "Powered by NextEdge Technologies." I closed the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. No need to rehearse. Every line was etched in my mind. A local bus lumbered around the corner, its headlights cutting through the dusk. People on the sidewalk moved to board, and I stood, dropped my fare into the slot, and stepped inside. The driver nodded curtly. For him, I was another passenger. I found a seat near the back, staring through the tinted window as the city lights smeared into streaks of gold and crimson. Every stop brought more passengers, more silent acknowledgement, none of them giving me a second glance. Perfect. The bus rumbled on, passing cafes with neon signs, corner shops closing up for the night, and high-rises that hid billion-dollar boardrooms behind glass facades. Those boardrooms were our destination. Yet here I was, 5 minutes from my mansion, sitting among strangers whose worlds were a different color. I took a slow breath, steering my mind away from any hesitation. I'd prepared for this moment. The elevator pitch, the subtle smile, the composed stride. But what I craved was the astonishment on their faces when they realized their quiet partner had been the mastermind all along. When the bus pulled up a block from Keen Holdings headquarters, I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. A businessman with a briefcase looked up, surprised to see me standing. For a moment he blinked, but then returned to his phone. I stepped off, slamming the yellow hydraulic doors behind me. The night air bit at my cheeks, and I took one last moment to center myself. I slipped on my cufflinks, their silver gleaming faintly, then headed toward the side entrance I'd scouted earlier. No red carpet for me tonight, just the unmarked door that led into the beating heart of the gala. Inside, the staff barely glanced at me as I showed my name badge to the guard. It read vendor, the perfect guys. The guard nodded, scanning the badge, and stepped aside. I walked through a short hallway into the opulent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across ornate columns, and hundreds of guests in tuxedos and gowns milled about, clutching flutes of champagne. Conversations swirled around me. Names, titles, well-rehearsed compliments. I felt the buzz of opportunity and status cling to every inch of space. It was intoxicating. Yet for all that grandeur, my attention snapped to the stage up ahead, where Mr. Keen's podium stood bathed in light, waiting for the moment our story would converge with theirs. I spotted Arden near the mic setup, touching an earbud, giving me the thumbs up from across the room. He looked confident, assured, the opposite of my own calm determination. I nodded back, made my way through the crowd with steady steps, and felt an unfamiliar thrill rise. People turned to look, some curious, some confused, some dismissive. I offered polite nods without breaking stride, heading for the side of the stage where Melanie Sloan, Mr. Keen's assistant, waited with a clipboard and a poised expression. She gave me the tiniest smile, that spark of complicity, and handed me my lapel mic weightless now. I clipped it on. The wire tucked discreetly, the mic resting near my collar. My heart thumped, not from fear, but from exhilaration. The plan was simple. Arden and I would share the stage, we'd reveal the stats, we'd let the numbers speak. Then I'd step forward, claim my moment, and let the world see the quiet man behind the mask. Tonight, they'd witness the power of underestimated ambition. I slipped backstage, leaving the ballroom's crescendo of polite chatter behind. The moment of transformation was seconds away. I closed my eyes, felt the electric hum of anticipation in my veins, and whispered under my breath, "Let them laugh." Then I stepped out into the glow of the spotlight, ready to turn every smirk into shock. Tonight, I would show them that vision wasn't just for those who made entrances in Teslas. Sometimes, vision belongs to the man who takes the bus. The valet circle brimmed with flashing cameras and whispered commentary when Talia and her friends swept in like a tide of sequins and leather. I'd watch from the bus stop as their sleek Tesla rolled to a stop beneath the crystal chandelier dangling over the entrance, the chauffeur popping the door open with a polished flourish. Talia stepped out first, her gown catching every spotlight, and she paused just long enough for the lenses to capture her silk glove and diamond cuff. Brooke and Jules followed in perfect synchronization, heels clicking against the marble as if choreographed. They leaned into each other, heads bent conspiratorially, laughter spilling out like champagne bubbles. I stood 10 minutes later at the unmarked side door, my reflection flickering in the tinted glass. A nameless driver glanced at me curiously as I passed, my coat collar turned up against the chill, an unremarkable face among the staff coming and going. No valet attendants guided me. No photographers trained their lenses on my arrival. I held the program in my pocket, its pages pressed flat by the weight of everything I'd sacrificed. I felt the calm hum of satisfaction in my chest as I hooked the door open and slipped inside, stepping onto a red runner of a very different sort, the carpet of opportunity. The ballroom loomed before me, a sprawling sea of crystal and gold. Long tables adorned with mother-of-pearl place, settings stretched toward a raised dais at the far end where Keen Holdings would soon commence their ceremony. Voices rose like a tide. Executives in midnight blue tuxedos discussing quarterly earnings, socialites comparing charity gala schedules, and designers critiquing this year's celebrity arrivals. The air smelled of expensive perfume and polished wood, a scent I'd come to associate with exclusivity and status. Here, no one knew who I was. That anonymity felt like a cloak woven by my own hands. I moved slowly, my shoes whispering against the polished floor. Each step was deliberate, an unhurried procession toward my moment. I could see Talia's back across the room, sweeping along a cluster of acquaintances as she basked in the glow of her own performance. Not a single glance drifted in my direction. They were too busy admiring the flash of her jewelry, the cut of her dress, the confidence she wore like a halo. They didn't notice the man who had enabled their entire evening through the code he wrote, the servers he configured, or the algorithms he perfected. They didn't see me walking into their world. At the edge of the crowd, I paused beside a refreshment table piled with hors d'oeuvres arranged like miniature sculptures. A waiter with a silver tray offered me a flute of champagne, but I shook my head. I didn't need sugar or bubbles. I needed readiness. My heart beat in quiet anticipation as I scanned the room for Arden. I found him leaning against a column near the stage, his eyes bright with the same calm confidence that had sealed countless investor meetings. He caught my gaze and inclined his head just enough to whisper, 10 minutes. I slipped farther into the shadows, letting the bustle of tuxedos and gowns swirl around me like an eddy. At that moment, the grand double doors at the entrance swung open, and a wave of late arrivals poured in. Board members in tailored blazers, media crews adjusting their lenses, and a few prominent guests huffing apologies for their tardiness. They all elbowed their way through the throng to reach the red carpet that snaked toward the dais. Media flashes painted the walls in brief bursts of white light. I watched without moving, letting each glare pass by harmlessly. None of it was for me, not tonight. I felt the buzz of conversation shift as people settled into their seats. Talia and her friends slipped onto plush chairs near the front, cooing over their names printed in gold on the program booklets. The host, Mr. Keene, rose from his seat and tapped the mic for attention. A hush fell like a velvet curtain. The chandeliers dimmed, leaving spotlights to chase reflections on champagne glasses and the glint of cufflinks. In that silence, I straightened my posture, rolled my shoulders back, and let my mind snap into focus. The first announcements passed in a polite drone, customary acknowledgments, thank yous for sponsors, and a brief overview of the company's philanthropic work. The audience nodded dutifully, but I could tell their thoughts drifted to the after-party, the networking, the selfies they would post. Their energy was diffused, expectant but scattered. Perfect. I stepped forward, curious glances flickering toward me as I crossed into the pool of light near the stage. My vendor badge hung at my hip, but the staff parted instinctively, sensing I belonged. Arden followed shortly behind with the presentation remote in hand. I took the remote and clicked once. A spotlight illuminated me fully, and the large screen behind the dais blinked to life. Charts appeared, lines soaring upward, a map of global integrations spreading across continents. Gasps rippled through the audience. A few heads turned my way. Talia's face froze a mid-smile when she recognized the slide deck I designed. I could almost feel her disbelief radiating across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Arden's voice echoed, amplified by the mic he now held. You're looking at the engine behind Keene Holdings' most successful quarter yet. NextEdge Technologies. My own voice found me before I realized I'd spoken, calm and clear and free of hesitation. Thank you for inviting me tonight. The words tasted like liberation. Cameras pivoted. Reporters shifted their notebooks. The hum of polite applause swelled into genuine appreciation. I held the remote with steady fingers, guiding them through metrics that showcased tripled revenue, efficiency improvements, and the seamless merging of our platform into their systems. Each statistic underlined a reality they'd refused to see, the quiet power of my work. From the corner of my eye, I saw Talia's lips part slightly, as if she were about to speak, but no words emerged. Brooke's phone hovered in front of her face, ready to capture the moment, yet her thumb hovered in indecision. The friends who had once laughed at me now sat stunned, their curated world cracking at the edges. When Arden clicked to the final slide, a simple declaration reading Founder and CEO, Marcus Roy, the room erupted. Mouths gaped. Patrons stood. Napkins trembled in champagne flutes. The red carpet they'd once monopolized was irrelevant now. The true star had entered unannounced through a side door. I set down the remote and bowed slightly, letting the applause wash over me. Each clap resonated like vindication. No one had noticed my arrival. No one had expected my presence. And that was precisely the point. At that moment, I realized I wasn't simply attending a gala anymore. I was rewriting the narrative of who Marcus Roy could be. And as the lights brightened and the cameras turned fully toward me, I stepped forward to claim every ounce of recognition I deserved, born not on the crest of a Tesla's door, but on the quiet momentum of a bus ride that carried me to my destiny. Talia's gaze found me across the room like a spotlight she didn't want to shine. I stood near the refreshment table, holding a glass of sparkling water, my courtesy concession to convention, and watched her roll her eyes so theatrically that even the chandelier above seemed to quiver. She whispered something to Brooke, who snorted and flicked her hair, her lips curling into a smirk. Jules leaned in to catch the punchline, their laughter echoing like a sneer in my ears. The words, "Did you take the scenic route?" drifted across the distance, loud enough for curious heads to turn and for small clutches of guests to exchange puzzled glances. It was the same old purr. I raised my water in a mock toast and offered her a calm nod, just took a smarter one. My voice was soft but clear, carrying the weight of every step I'd taken since that bus ride. Nobody else heard the undercurrent of meaning, that I'd arrived not by status but by strategy, that I'd come to prove that what truly mattered was vision, not vanity. Talia scoffed and turned back completely, as if I were a mirror she'd thrown away. I took a measured sip and let the cool water anchor my thoughts. The sparkle of crystal glasses and golden decor might have dazzled everyone else, but all I saw were reflections of entitlement and assumption. The room hummed with conversations about board seats, charitable donations, and the next social whirlwind. Nobody wondered who had developed the technology behind the real magic of the evening, how the lighting sequences synced perfectly, how the streaming feed ran without a hitch, how the guest registration system hadn't crashed under peak traffic. That was my work, hidden beneath layers of champagne flutes and designer tuxedos. A waiter drifted by with an offering of smoked salmon canapés. I took one, tasting the rich, briny bite and letting its saltiness remind me that sometimes the smallest things carried the biggest impact. Across the room, Arden waved at me from near the stage. His confident smile was a reminder that we were on schedule, our moment of revelation just minutes away. I took the canopy into my mouth and swallowed deliberately, welcoming the steady hum of anticipation in my veins. Talia was oblivious as she posed for selfies with Jules and Brooke, tilting her head to catch the perfect light, lips pursed in an expression that said, "I am admired." Every camera flash was a dagger to the trust one once thought we shared. I remember the early days, when she braved coding sessions at my side, cheering on bugs I fixed at dawn. Back then, I was the underdog, but we were a team. Now she stood on a pedestal I built but no longer invited me to climb. She noticed me then finally, her eyes flickering from the phone screen to my face. There was a moment of confusion, as though she recognized me as a stranger in our own story. She opened her mouth, perhaps to chastise me further, but closed it abruptly when her gaze landed on Arden stepping up to the podium. She tilted her head, curiosity breaking through her disdain. I watched her collect herself, smoothing her dress, as if she were adjusting her armor for the first time. The room stilled as Mr. Keene's assistant, Melanie Sloan, tapped the microphone to signal the presentation was about to begin. Talia and her friends slid into their seats, pressing their phones to redial whatever live stream they were following. I took a final breath of the fragrant air, jasmine and vetiver mingling around me, and set my glass down with quiet determination. This was no longer about humiliation or proving a point. This was about rewriting expectations. As the lights dimmed, I stepped forward and caught Talia's gaze. Her lips parted, but she stayed seated, eyes widening. The first slide appeared behind the dais, a sleek infographic with the words "NextEdge Technologies" in bold. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I didn't need to speak yet. The silence spoke for itself. Talia's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to, finally, something like regret, though I wasn't sure she earned it. Arden's voice cut through the hush. Tonight, we celebrate our partnership with Keene Holdings and the innovations that drove their latest success. Behind every great company is a team, and sometimes an unexpected visionary. He clicked to the next slide, and the screen filled with numbers so impressive that glasses dropped to tables and heads swiveled in disbelief. Let me introduce you to the man behind the code, the architect of your streamlined systems, Marcus Roy. My name echoed in the ballroom like a verdict. Talia's jaw slackened. The friends who'd mocked me gasped in unison. The applause started slowly, a single pair of hands punctuating the air, then swelled into a tide of recognition. The hall that once carried their laughter now buzzed with my name. I pocketed my hands, stepped out into the center of the stage, and let the spotlights warm my face. In that moment, I felt something shift beneath me. The brittle veneer of their assumptions cracked. Their laughter, once sharp and exclusionary, dissolved into an ovation that honored what I'd accomplished. Talia watched, hand over her mouth, her eyes wet with something I didn't immediately name: admiration, embarrassment, perhaps shame. But it was too late for ironclad defenses. I had taken the smarter route, yes, and now, the route of respect. I smiled and raised my hand in acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said, my tone quiet but triumphant, "for believing in our vision when it was just a line of code and a dream." My eyes found Talia's across the distance. She opened her mouth once, and this time, words tumbled out, "Marcus." But I simply nodded, letting the applause answer for me. As I walked off the stage, leaving the stunned crowd behind, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. They'd called me the disposable husband, another accessory to discard. But tonight, I proved that being underestimated was my greatest advantage. Because when they finally looked beyond the lacquer and lace, they saw the man they'd ignored. And that recognition was worth far more than any grand entrance. The soft thrum of conversation faded into a background hum as I slipped backstage, following Arden through a narrow corridor lined with coiled extension cords and rows of neatly stacked folding chairs. The air smelled of damp concrete and freshly installed cables, a far cry from the polished luxury of the ballroom. Here, Behind the velvet curtains, the real machinery of the evening pulsed, microphones waiting to amplify voices, spotlights poised to cut through the shadows, monitors glowing with rehearsal screens that mirrored the grand hall beyond. Arden nudged me toward a small table where Melanie Sloan stood with a clipboard, her expression cool and efficient. "All set?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She tapped her pen against the paper. "Marcus Roy, lapel mic on /Arden Smith, handheld mic on /Q and T-10. The words blurred with adrenaline. I nodded, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation coil in my gut. "Yes," I said, adjusting the mic wire beneath my jacket. I tested the clip near my collar, ensuring it sat flat and invisible. The skin of my neck prickled as I tugged at the final loop of cable, securing the tiny microphone that would carry my voice into the chandeliers and beyond. Arden smoothed out his suit jacket, his fingers working the fabric with quiet purpose. "We're good," he confirmed, meeting my eyes. I glanced toward the seam in the curtain through which light spilled. Beyond it, I could almost hear the murmur of the audience settling back into their seats. Somewhere near the front row, Talia's heels tapped against the floor in restless impatience. I dared a glance at the small side monitor showing her face. She leaned forward, brows drawn, curiosity eclipsing disdain for the first time. That flicker of hesitation told me she sensed something was about to change. A voice crackled in my earpiece. "5 minutes to go," whispered the event technician. The signal triggered an electric jolt through my veins. 5 minutes until we seize the narrative. 5 minutes until the hidden architect of Keen's success emerged from the shadows. Arden patted my shoulder. "Remember," he said softly, "we keep it concise. Lead with the impact, follow with the vision." I closed my eyes for a second, inhaled deeply, and recalled the countless late nights spent drafting our talking points. Lines about efficiency gains, market disruption, and how we'd turn skepticism into validation. But those words were more than rhetoric. They were the measure of everything we'd built in secret. I nodded, the memory solidifying into renewed resolve. Melanie checked her watch and motioned to the curtain. "Your cue is next. Just step out when the lights hit." She handed me a small card with bullet points, my anchor in the sea of anticipation. I tucked it into my pocket and took one final breath, letting the cool backstage air fill my lungs. Somewhere down the hall, the soft hum of Mr. Keen's introduction reached my ears, a polite murmur elevating to applause as he thanked the board members and philanthropic partners. The signal was clear, my moment was imminent. I shifted beside Arden, our shoulders almost brushing. We shared a nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of everything we'd endured to be here. The lights dimmed further, and a single spotlight framed the podium. A hush fell over the ballroom, so complete it felt like a held breath. The seam in the curtain parted, and I stepped forward, Arden close behind, the edges of my vision illuminated by the glow of the stage lights. I paused at the threshold, heart hammering, and let the silence wash over me. The audience leaned in, faces half hidden in the gloom, but shimmering with expectancy. I offered a calm smile and raised my hand in a brief, measured wave. The applause was polite, curiosity expressed through taped claps and shifting seats. I cleared my throat, feeling the lapel mic pick up the movement. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady as it wove through the rows of seats. "Thank you, Mr. Keen, for your introduction and for the opportunity to share this evening with you all." I allowed my gaze to sweep the room, locking eyes with Talia in the front row, holding her attention like never before. I know many of you may not know me personally. A ripple of laughter, gentle but pointed, reminded me of the whispers that had trailed me all night. I let it linger, a reminder of every time I'd been dismissed. But I continued, "You know my work." Behind me, Arden clicked the remote. The big screen flickered to life with a graph showing Keen Holdings' most recent revenue surge. "Our collaboration has increased your global system efficiency by nearly 40% this quarter," I said, nodding toward the data. "Those numbers aren't just lines on a slide. They represent streamlined operations in 3 continents, real-time analytics that prevented costly downtime, and trust built between our teams. In short, they represent millions of dollars in newfound value." A murmur of surprise spread through the audience. Heads turned, whispers rose, and I sensed the pivot in energy. They were recalibrating their assumptions. I let the pause stretch, giving the impact time to settle. Then I leaned forward slightly, voice warm and confident. When Arden and I founded NextEdge Technologies, we promised ourselves we'd let our work speak louder than any press release. We built in basements and coded through weekends, all while others doubted our potential. Tonight, it's not about the man behind the code. It's about what quiet innovation can achieve when you give it space to grow. Another click, and the screen displayed a global map with glowing nodes where our software now operated. NextEdge powers over 40% of these systems, I said, gesturing to the map. This week, our company surpassed a valuation of $1.2 billion. That milestone is not just ours. It belongs to every engineer, every analyst, and to Keen Holdings, which took a chance on us when no one else did. I paused again, letting the magnitude of the moment resonate. Then, with deliberate calm, I addressed the whispers that had haunted me. I know some of you laughed when I arrived alone, taking public transportation while others cruised in Teslas. But that bus ride reminded me that true progress isn't always flashy. It's steady, deliberate, and sometimes invisible until it reveals its power. Light laughter rippled through the room, not cruel but genuine, tinged with admiration. Finally, I concluded. So tonight, I invite you to rethink what success looks like. It doesn't always roar onto the red carpet. Sometimes, it takes the back door and arrives on its own terms. The applause began as tentative claps but swelled into a standing ovation. Cameras clicked, and the room shifted into a new reality. I was no longer the quiet husband, the underestimated partner, or the vendor in the corner. I was Marcus Roy, visionary, achiever, CEO. As I stood beneath the spotlight, the applause washing over me, Arden stepped forward to share final remarks on our future roadmap. Talia watched from the front row, her expression unreadable, as the truth of what I'd built became impossible to deny. In that moment, I realized whispers and wires had been merely the prologue. The real story was just beginning. The lights dimmed so completely that the last whispers of conversation dissolved into a hush as profound as the moment before a storm breaks. I stood just off stage, my hands clasped lightly in front of me, the lapel mic humming softly against my jacket. Arden hovered at my side, eyes bright with anticipation. Through the thin curtain I could see Mr. Keen ascend the podium, his silhouette framed by the spotlights. I felt Talia's gaze burn into my back, the silence between us charged with unresolved tension and unspoken questions. And now, Keen's voice resonated through the cavernous hall, amplified and authoritative. Before we proceed with our recognitions, we have a surprise announcement. A special acknowledgement for a client who has truly made history this week. His words landed like a starting pistol, setting the audience's pulses racing. I inhaled slowly, tasting the faint aroma of polished wood and jasmine-scented air. The program booklets began to rustle as guests leaned forward, champagne glasses paused midair. I could hear the faint click of camera shutters, sensing that every reporter and influencer in the room had gone rigid with curiosity. Keen paused deliberately, his hands sweeping across the audience as if gathering their collective attention. A man whose innovation now powers over 40% of our global systems. A visionary whose product has just shattered the valuation ceiling, pushing his net worth past the remarkable milestone of $1.2 billion. He let the words hang, the silence swelling like a hell breath. I felt my heart pound not with fear, but with the exhilaration of inevitability. This was the moment I'd built toward in every late-night coding session, every cautious investor pitch, every shrugged-off critique. Then Keen's tone softened with warmth as he offered a genuine smile. Please join me in celebrating. Mr. Marcus Roy, founder and CEO of NextEdge Technologies. Silence crashed into the room before it erupted. Gasps rippled across rows of guests, napkins fluttered to the floor, and the hum of astonishment swelled into a roar. I stepped out from behind the curtain, my polished shoes clicking against the stage floor. The spotlight found me, bathing my face in brilliant white light. I saw Talia's mouth fall open, the whispered condolences of her friends morphing into stunned admiration. Brooke stood, her champagne glass trembling in one hand. Jules clutched her phone as though bracing for a miracle. The air felt electric, charged with collective disbelief. I paused at center stage, letting the applause wash over me. In that instant, I wasn't just the man who'd taken a bus or the one her friends had ridiculed. I was the force behind every chart, every statistic, every promise of transformation. I straightened my shoulders, buttoned my jacket, and lifted my chin. The mic picked up the whisper of fabric and the silent confidence that pulsed through my veins. Thank you, Mr. Keen, I began, my voice steady and resonant. And thank you all for being here tonight. The hall quieted in respectful attention as I surveyed the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I know some of you may not have expected this announcement. After all, I arrived alone, via public transportation, while others made their grand entrances in expensive cars. I let that note linger, a subtle nod to the moment Talia had cast me aside. A ripple of laughter followed. Good-natured, tinged with embarrassment for those who'd sneered earlier. I founded NextEdge Technologies with a simple promise: to build solutions that work quietly in the background, empowering great companies to excel without fanfare. A click from Arden advanced the slides behind me, revealing a sleek timeline of our milestones. The audience leaned in again, drawn by the stark contrast between my modest arrival and the magnitude of our achievements. In just 4 years, our platform has tripled the efficiency of global operations, integrated seamlessly with international systems, and established itself as a leader in predictive analytics. The screen displayed glowing maps and exponential curves, visual proof of the quiet revolution we'd orchestrated. Someone near the front murmured, "I had no idea," and I allowed that admission to underscore every overlooked hour I'd logged in dimly lit rooms. I continued, "This week, we surpassed a $1.2 billion valuation. But more than that, we demonstrated that disruptive innovation often occurs away from the spotlight, in basements, at kitchen tables, in the relentless pursuit of a better solution." My gaze swept to Talia, whose eyes shimmered with conflicted emotions: pride, regret, longing. I heard the soft shuffle of feet as guests shifted, eager to digest the revelation. Cameras flashed as reporters jockeyed for a better angle. Social media handles blinked on phone screens, ready to broadcast live. In that swell of interest, I sensed the tides turning irrevocably in my favor. The narrative had shifted. I was no longer the overlooked spouse, but the underdog triumphant. I allowed a reflective pause before delivering the final line I'd rehearsed so many times. Let us remember that success isn't measured by the grandeur of an entrance, but by the impact of one's work. Sometimes, the real power arrives quietly, and for me, that power took the bus. Applause thundered through the ballroom, louder and more sustained than any luxury car's engine roar. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring the validation that went beyond champagne toasts and fashion statements. Arden joined me on stage, offering a proud grin as we exchanged a quick nod. The culmination of our strategy had arrived with perfect timing. Mr. Keene stepped forward again, clapping heartily. "Marcus Roy, everyone," he announced, his voice brimming with genuine respect. Balloons subtly released from the balcony, and the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Talia stood as well, wiping a tear from her cheek, her composure fracturing under the weight of astonishment. As the cheers subsided, I remained at the center of the stage, allowing each applause and camera click to settle into the record of my success. Tonight, the man they thought they knew had redefined every expectation. And in that instant, I understood that the greatest triumph wasn't the net worth or the accolades. It was the moment they saw the impossible made real, quietly but undeniably, on the back of a bus ride and an unwavering belief in my vision. I stood at the edge of the stage, heart thrumming like a live wire, as the last echoes of applause faded into a charged silence. The podium beneath me felt solid, reassuring an anchor after months of uncertainty and whispers. Talia's frozen smile gleamed from the front row, her friends beside her utterly speechless. The grandeur of the ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the polished marble, the world I had once navigated as an invisible spouse now served as the backdrop for my triumph. All eyes were on me, and I could feel their gaze sharpening, probing the man who dared to take the bus instead of the Tesla. I lifted the mic with steady hands, letting the hush settle around me like anticipation itself, knowing that nothing I said in the next few moments would merely drift into polite conversation. This was my moment to turn shock into respect, doubt into belief. The spotlights drew soft circles on my suit, illuminating the crease of my jacket, the silver gleam of my cufflinks, the same ones Talia had given me 2 anniversaries ago, now shining like trophies of my resilience. "Thank you," I began, my voice deep and clear, resonating through every corner of the room. I paused, allowing the sincerity of the simple phrase to settle. They had thanked me. Me, Marcus Roy, the man they'd overlooked. A ripple of applause rose again, warmer this time, tinged with genuine admiration. I let them have that moment before diving into the heart of my message. When Arden and I founded NextEdge Technologies, we had no red carpets waiting for us. I continued, scanning the crowd until my eyes rested on Talia's. She sat rigid, every ounce of her poised composure strained by the weight of realization. I softened my tone, intent on bridging the gap between our worlds. We started in a small apartment, two laptops balanced on a folding table and dreams that felt larger than the ceilings above us. We coded through late nights, fueled by nothing but coffee and conviction, because we believed in an idea so powerful it could change industries. A murmur of recognition passed through the audience, executives nodding at the familiar story of humble beginnings, influencers leaning forward to capture every word. I saw reporters dip their pens, eagerness lighting their notebooks. My voice flowed on, narrative building like a tide. Tonight, I stand before you not as a vendor or a footnote in someone else's story, but as the founder and CEO of a company that now powers over 40% of Keen Holdings' global systems. A company that achieved a valuation of $1.2 billion this week, a milestone we reached because we dared to work quietly, letting our results speak. I allowed my words to sink in, letting the hush swell with the weight of our achievement. The contrast between my silent assent and the grand entrances of the evening created a tension that crackled in the air. Then I leaned forward slightly, voice intimate yet firm. You see, true innovation doesn't always demand a flashy unveiling or an extravagant display. Sometimes, it builds momentum in the shadows, gathering strength until it bursts into the spotlight, catching the world off guard. The lights dimmed further for a moment, and behind me the giant screen flickered to life with a series of before and after metrics. Raw numbers transformed into vivid visuals, server uptime climbing from 92 to 99.9%, data processing times sliced in half, user satisfaction scores rocketing skyward. The audience gasped, heads swiveling as they absorbed the tangible evidence of my work. They weren't just hearing my story, they were witnessing it. I straightened and let a wry smile curve my lips as I addressed the laughter that had greeted my arrival. Yes, I arrived alone on a city bus while others flaunted their status in luxury vehicles. And I understand why that was amusing tonight, until you realize that success isn't measured by how you enter a room, but by what you bring when you get there. A warm laugh rolled through the crowd, genuine and relieved as if a weight had lifted. I saw Talia's shoulders shift as she uncrossed and recrossed her legs, her eyes glistening. I pressed on, my voice threading through the ornate room. I'm proud of the journey that brought me here. From that folding table to this podium. And I'm proud of the partnerships we've formed, the problems we've solved, and the future we're building together. Because a dream doesn't honor you with spotlight or applause, it honors you by giving you purpose, by pushing you to grind through doubt and emerge stronger. Another click of the remote, and the screen displayed a montage of global cities, New York, London, Singapore, connected by glowing digital conduits, illustrating the reach of our platform. The crowd murmured appreciation, leaning into the story of transformation. I felt an electric satisfaction at the shift in atmosphere. Their skepticism had transformed into curiosity, then respect, then genuine excitement. As the final slide faded, I paused, absorbing the moment of unity I had fostered. Here I was, surrounded by high society and industry leaders, yet what mattered wasn't the grandeur of the decor. It was the shared belief that technology could empower, elevate, and democratize opportunities. I smiled genuinely and concluded, so tonight, I ask you to rethink the markers of success, not the size of an entrance, but the depth of your impact, not the noise you make, but the legacy you leave. Thank you for believing in Next Edge Technologies and in me. The applause that erupted was thunderous and genuine, echoing against the crystal walls. I bowed once, then stepped aside to let Arden take the stage and outline our roadmap for the next year, expanding into new markets, enhancing AI-driven insights, and forging even deeper collaborations. He spoke with confidence, but I watched from the wings, heart full, knowing that whatever he said would only amplify the story we'd written tonight. I glanced toward Talia one last time. She stood, clapping with every fiber of her being, tears tracing delicate paths down her cheeks. The friends who'd mocked me now approached, offering tentative congratulations. I allowed them to fumble through their apologies without interrupting, focusing instead on the knowledge that I had reclaimed my narrative. As Arden wrapped up and the crowd rose to their feet once more, I stepped onto the stage to join him. Together, we took a modest bow, the spotlight illuminating not just two men, but a partnership born of grit and vision. Tonight, they saw Marcus Roy, and in seeing me, they discovered the power of unwavering belief, the greatest triumph of all. The moment I stepped away from the podium, I felt the current of astonishment swirl around me like a living thing. Reporters along the perimeter of the ballroom exchanged hurried whispers, their pens racing across notepads, eyes darting from the screens behind us to me, standing center stage. Smartphones emerged like synchronized fireflies, live-streaming the scene. A man once dismissed, now commanding the room. In a corner, I spotted a cluster of journalists huddled around a laptop. One woman leaned in, fingers poised over the keyboard, as if she couldn't decide whether to tweet first or check her source for confirmation. The red, live, icon blinked steadily, broadcasting our moment to the world beyond crystal walls. I lingered just long enough to let the magnitude of their reaction settle. The audience, initially frozen in disbelief, now buzzed with excitement. Conversations erupted in hushed tones. Did you see that valuation slide? He quoted the efficiency metrics perfectly. I can't believe he came by bus. Each whispered remark reinforced the shift in perspective from amusement to admiration. Through my peripheral vision, I caught Talia leaning forward, her expression an intricate tapestry of pride, regret, and awe. I wondered if she recognized the quiet vindication pulsing behind my calm exterior, the years of grinding beneath the radar culminating in this electric revelation. The live feed on the grand screen behind me snapped to a social media dashboard. Hashtags trended instantly. Hashtag silent revolution. Hashtag Marcus Roy. Hashtag bust a billionaire. The room dimmed for a moment as images from Forbes' cover story flickered into view. A sleek portrait of me in contemplative profile, the headline proclaiming, "The man no one saw coming." A collective gasp followed as the magazine's bold tagline scrolled across the screen. Next Edge Technologies, the invisible engine driving tomorrow's world. Reporters leaned against the columns, eyes wide, ready to capture every nuance. I felt a surge of pride. Our story had transcended the gala, bypassing the velvet rope to reach viewers across every time zone. Arden returned to the stage beside me, offering a fist bump that conveyed more than congratulations. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of late-night coding sessions, investor rejections, and the indomitable spirit that kept us pushing forward. I glanced at the board members in their tailored suits, their earlier nods of polite recognition now replaced by enthusiastic applause. I saw executives whispering to one another, likely plotting partnerships and expansions based on the technology I'd unveiled. The shy subsidiary partner had transformed into a visionary leader in a single, breathtaking moment. A hush fell once more as I lifted the mic for a closing remark, my voice carrying the resonance of triumph and humility entwined. While you were laughing, I said, letting the words hang, we were building the foundation of the future. We didn't seek spotlight. We sought progress. The applause that followed was immediate and intense, reverberating through the ornate space like rolling thunder. Champagne glasses rose, and toasts were whispered in my direction. I caught snippets of conversation, plans for deep tech collaborations, inquiries about demos, congratulatory smiles that felt genuine for the first time. Talia rose to her feet. Her applause was the slowest, most deliberate of all, each clap imbued with the complex weight of shared history. I sensed her reflecting on our early days, covering my scribbled diagrams in her sketchbooks, coding side by side on my laptop, hoping together that our dreams would one day outshine convention. Now, decades of collective memory flickered behind her eyes. I gave her a slight nod, a silent, "We made it," acknowledging both the distance we'd traveled and the divide that our success had exposed. As the formal segment concluded, guests began to filter into smaller groups, phones still aloft, eager for selfie opportunities and interviews. Editors sought me out by name. "Marcus, can we talk about your growth strategy?" Venture capitalists approached Arden with partnership ideas. An influencer slipped a card onto my palm. "Love your story. Let's collaborate on a tech documentary." The incredible irony was that I had entered the evening invisible, and now I moved through the crowd like a magnet, pulling admiration and opportunity in my wake. I took one final scan of the ballroom, the scene etched indelibly into my mind. Crystal chandeliers dripping light onto celebratory faces, journalists weaving through clusters of execs, Talia standing among them with a new respect shining in her eyes. In that moment, I realized that being underestimated had been my greatest asset. Because when the world finally turned its gaze toward me, it saw not an accident of privilege, but a testament to perseverance and quiet genius. And as I slipped the microphone into Arden's hand and stepped back into the throng, I carried with me the unshakable certainty that sometimes, The most powerful revolutions are the ones no one notices until they can't afford to look away. The applause still reverberated in my ears as I drifted off the stage and back into the swirls of tuxedos and gowns. Everywhere I looked, faces turned toward me, some with eager smiles, others with the lingering surprise of those who'd underestimated me. My pulse hummed with the exhilaration of victory, but beneath it lay a new current, curiosity. How would this change everything? I navigated toward the hallway by the restrooms, where the crowd thinned and the air smelled of polished stone and whispered confidences. Talia emerged from the ballroom, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Her eyes were fixed on me, no longer with scorn, but with a tremor of vulnerability I'd never seen. She stopped a few feet away, folding her arms as if to brace herself. Marcus, her voice caught on the word, as though she'd rehearsed apologies but found them inadequate. The laughter of her friends drifted faintly from the ballroom behind her, replaced by the murmur of people exchanging business cards. I met her gaze squarely, the surge of our shared past flickering between us. Talia, I replied, keeping my tone even. You look different now. She swallowed and took a hesitant step closer. I had no idea. The words tumbled out in a rush. Why didn't you tell me any of this? We could have, her voice cracked, and she shook her head. I'll let you embarrass yourself. She paused, eyes moist, as if expecting me to forgive and forget. I studied her face, so carefully curated, yet unguarded now. You didn't embarrass me, I said quietly. You underestimated me. Her shoulders sagged. I thought you were happy following my lead. I thought you didn't want more. You never asked, I countered gently. You assumed I was content with the background. She blinked, confusion and regret mingling. I didn't realize you were alone in all of this. She touched my arm lightly, an unfamiliar gesture of tenderness. I'm sorry. I looked away, toward the glowing exit sign above the hallway door. The gala bus still pulsed inside, but here it was quiet. Just the two of us confronting the shift. It wouldn't have mattered, I said. Even if you'd known, you'd have taken the Tesla and left me on the curb. Talia winced, as if struck. I see that now. She reached out again, but her hand hovered between us. Marcus, I want to understand. What's next for you? I spared her a small smile. First, I'll enjoy this moment. Then, I'll refocus on next milestone. I brushed imaginary lint off my sleeve. I might even pick you up next time if you're willing to ride the bus. Her lips trembled into a genuine smile. I think I'd like that. I nodded, feeling the steady satisfaction of a man in control of his destiny. Good. Because sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest advantage. We stood there, the hall lights dimmed to a soft glow, two figures connected by history yet separated by the revelations of tonight. Around us, the gala continued, voices rose in toasts, footsteps clicked in celebration. But in that hallway, wrapped in the hush of rediscovered possibility, I realized the real victory wasn't just my public triumph. It was reclaiming the narrative of my own life, by bus or by Broadway, on my own terms. The valet area had emptied into a hushed standstill by the time I emerged, the clatter of high heels and idle chatter replaced by the soft whine of an idling engine. My Aston Martin Valkyrie stood gleaming under the streetlights, a contrast to the bus I'd arrived on, yet a symbol of the same journey. Silent resolve rewarded. I approached the car, slipping into the bespoke leather seat, fingers brushing the carbon fiber steering wheel. The engine growled to life beneath me, a visceral reminder that I was no longer the man who took the bus out of necessity. I had the world ready at my fingertips. From the corner of my eye, I saw Talia and her friends standing by the valet, their Teslas parked like empty trophies behind them. They stared as I unbuckled my seatbelt, casually pressing a button to lower the window. The warm night air drifted in, carrying the faint echo of the gala's final toasts. I caught Brooke's eager expression, anticipation mixed with apology, and Jules looking uncertain, as if the world they'd known had shifted on its axis. I smiled, a gesture both gracious and pointed. Nice entrance tonight, I called, voice drifting through the open window. The Valkyrie's low rumble underscored every word. But I think the exit was mine. They exchanged glances, surprise layering over their faces. Talia stepped forward, her stilettos clicking against the pavement. She paused at the edge of the car, resting a hand on the roof. Marcus, she hesitated, searching for the words that eluded her. That was incredible. Her tone carried genuine on now, stripped of earlier arrogance. I leaned back, still as composed as the night itself. Thanks, I said, voice soft. Tonight wasn't about entrances or exits. It was about being seen for who you really are. My gaze drifted to her, measuring the distance between us. I hope you know that taking the bus was never about humility. It was about focus. She nodded slowly, absorbing the meaning. I do now. A flicker of a smile crossed her lips, one unguarded and real. I'm proud of you. She bit her lower lip, vulnerability softening her usual poise. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I studied her for a moment, the crisp lines of her gown illuminated by the Aston's taillights. We both grew, I replied, voice even. Some lessons are just harder to learn. I tapped the start button again, the engine's rumble rising like a vow. Enjoy the ride home, Talia. She glanced at Jules and Brooke, offering them a small, meaningful nod. Then she turned away, heels clicking across the pavement, a solitary figure reclaiming her own path. I watched her go, feeling the final chord of our shared story hum in the cool air. With a smooth pull of the gear selector, I eased the Valkyrie forward, gliding past the Teslas, past the silent cluster of polished status symbols that once defined the night. As the city lights stretched into lines, I remembered the buzz of that bus engine, the patient wheels carrying me toward my destiny. Now, I had a car worthy of the road ahead, but I hadn't forgotten the journey that brought me here. I drove without urgency, savoring the hum of the engine and the clarity of every thought. The late-night streets unfolded before me, silent avenues lined with shadowed facades, the occasional taxi idling with its lone passenger, streetlights flickering over empty sidewalks. I passed quiet cafes and shuttered boutiques, each a reminder of the world that continued on, unaware of my triumph. When I finally turned onto our tree-lined suburban street, the mansion loomed in the distance, a silent witness to my transformation. Yet tonight, I felt no need to return there. My life had expanded beyond any front door, shaped by vision more than walls. I slowed near the bus stop, that lonely shelter where my quiet revolution began. Its empty bench glowed under a lamppost, waiting for the next dreamer. I nodded once, as if tipping my hat, then pressed the accelerator. The Valkyrie surged forward, its lights fading into the distance. Because sometimes being underestimated is your greatest weapon, and when you finally rise, you choose your ride.